You're listening to Little Green Cheese, episode 16. Well, welcome back. I'm Gavin Weber, and this podcast is where you can learn about cheese making at home. Well, this week we're going to be talking about whey. Now, I've managed to come up with 15 uses for whey, and the reason I'm coming up with this is because as a home cheese maker, you always end up with a mountain of whey, and usually there's more than you can use yourself. So, here we go through the list. So you can use it in baking, so you could use it instead of buttermilk. If you use it in bread instead of milk, it actually makes the crust a lot browner. It's also fantastic instead of buttermilk in pancakes. The second thing you can use whey for is obviously ricotta. Now, I've also produced a whey ricotta YouTube video tutorial, and I will put that into the show notes. It's very simple. You get the leftover whey, you heat it up to between 92 and 97 degrees centigrade, and then what you can do is add a quarter of a cup of distilled white vinegar or white wine vinegar to the whey, and it separates into curds and whey again, and it actually gets rid of all of the additional protein that's left behind. Look, usually out of about 6 litres of whey, you will end up with about 400 grams of whey. And you can add a little bit of milk at the start, and that'll increase your yield as well. Now, another thing, you've seen all those bodybuilders drinking whey milkshakes. Whey powdered milkshakes or protein shakes. Well, that's all made from whey. And what they do is they evaporate all of the liquid, and they have powder left over. So what you can do, you can actually drink it straight, especially if it's a sweet whey and it's not used, not collected after a acid cheese like, say, mozzarella or making ricotta even further. So it doesn't have any lactose left if you use a sweet whey. So it's good for people who are lactose intolerant. It's full of protein, and it is easy to digest because it doesn't have that lactose in it. So yeah, you can drink it straight. It's a little bit on the acidic side. Probably not so good for people with gastric reflux disorder. So yeah, you can drink it straight. It does taste a little bit sour. The next use I've got for whey is for fermenting vegetables. So if you're into making sauerkraut or kimchi, you can add a few tablespoons, and it will help the fermentation process as well as the salt that you normally add to the sauerkraut or kimchi. So that helps with fermenting vegetables. Another use is to soak grains or beans. And so soaking dried beans or dried grains overnight, because what that helps to do is it helps break down the phytates in the grains, and it makes them more digestible. I learnt that by reading Nourishing Traditions. Now, as I'm an avid gardener, I actually do use whey in the garden. You can dilute it, so it's kind of like nature's miracle grow. It's quite amazing. It contains nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus. It also contains traces of calcium left over from the casein in the milk, and it also has some magnesium in it. So it's a good all-rounder. There is a little bit of salt, a natural salt in it as well. It really does help with the microbe activity in the soil. I dilute it 1 litre of whey to 8 litres of water. And that helps dilute it enough so it's not too acidic for plants. So it's fantastic on acid-loving plants, things like tomatoes and citrus, especially good for tomatoes because the increased calcium helps the tomatoes to grow, and it prevents what's known as blossom rot. which is good as well. Another use is you can feed it to your pets. Now, not unlike humans, it's great for dogs, cats, chickens. My chickens especially like it. I haven't got any pigs, but I know for a fact that the leftover whey is used after making parmesan and fed to Parma ham or Parma pigs in Italy. So it has the same benefits as humans. It can increase muscle mass, but not your fat mass. Another use is that you can freeze it. If you've got too much of it in the after cheese making, you can freeze it. It freezes readily. I wouldn't use it after about 6 months, but you probably then use it in the garden, so no big deal. So yeah, it freezes well. Just put it back in a milk carton and pop it into the freezer. Now, you can also use it in compost bins or compost heaps because it also helps increase the microbe activity there. And you just add it before turning the heap. I wouldn't add it and let it sit because it'll start to smell and reek and make your compost bin go a little bit pongy. You can use the whey to make a brine and you can store feta and halloumi. So you just add some salt to your whey and then store the feta or halloumi. And the good thing about using whey instead of a brine is that you don't need to add calcium chloride to the brine because the whey has calcium in it already. So it helps stop the cheese from going soggy if you've experienced that with a feta, and it helps harden the cheese too. And it can store for a long time. Another use for whey is that you can add it to soups and stews. It makes a really good base. I've used it in soups, especially in minestrone. You can use it as a substitute for a chicken stock, or you can mix it 50-50 with a homemade stock as well. It works really well. Another one is fruit smoothies. So instead of using milk, which has a little bit of fat in it, you can add the protein to your fruit smoothie, so things like strawberries, and add a little bit of honey to that, and that makes a fantastic smoothie. If you want a little bit more creaminess, sure, you can add a little bit of milk, or you can add a scoop of ice cream to thicken that smoothie up. They do taste delicious with that extra honey as well. Now, another great thing you can do with whey is a meat marinade. So if you're a meat eater, then you can actually tenderize meat with whey because the enzymes in whey help break down the sinews of the meat. Now, if you want to add a little bit of flavour to that, add some dried herbs or some fresh herbs like rosemary or thyme, and some salt and pepper, and add that to the whey. If you want it to act a lot faster, what you can do is put your meat and your whey and seasonings into a bag and vac pack that, and it penetrates into the meat a lot quicker, and it makes a really tender steak, that's for sure. Another way you can use your whey, pardon the pun, you can stretch your mozzarella. Instead of using the microwave to stretch the curd, what you can do is you can add salt to whey, and I think it's about 1/4 cup that you add to the whey, and you use that to stretch the curds, and you do that a few times, and you can make a lovely big mozzarella ball. So that's a quick mozzarella, but using heated whey. Another use that I've used as well is use it as a fungicide. So in my veggie patch, the cucurbits family, which is zucchini, pumpkins, squash, all those sort of vegetables, they readily get infected by a disease, a fungus called powdery mildew. And one of the traditional methods is to spray milk diluted with a little bit of water and a little bit of olive oil and shake that up and spray it on. But instead of using the milk, which you could use to make cheese, use the whey. It's just as good. It's got the same sort of acidity. It's still got the same proteins which kill the funguses or the fungi, on the leaves of your plants. It's also good for broad bean rust, as I found out. So a final last one, which leads into our news story, it can actually be used for making biogas. So you can ferment the whey anaerobically, and that produces methane, and you can use that methane once it's cleaned to generate electricity. Probably not a doable thing at home, but certainly on an industrial scale. Instead of turning it into a waste product, they can actually use it to make biogas and yeah, like I said, generate electricity. Okay, we've got the cheese of the week. Now, I recently produced a cheese making video tutorial for halloumi. Now, halloumi is a Cypriot cheese, and it's made in both by the Turkish Cypriots and the Greek Cypriots, and it's actually the same recipe. Pretty simple to make. I used 8 litres of raw milk that I managed to get my hands on, and it produced the most fantastic cheese. Now, halloumi doesn't readily melt, so it's not a melting cheese. You can use it to cook. So you can cook with halloumi. And what we did once we made the halloumi, and you can go and have a look at the recipe over on littlegreencheese.com, we fried in a frying pan with a little bit of olive oil, and then you just brown each side very gently. And then what we did, we ate that with fresh watermelon. And I tell you what, the taste that the cheese and the watermelon go together like peas and carrots. It's amazing. It's such an amazing flavour. So do yourself a favour, pop over to littlegreencheese.com and have a look at my halloumi video tutorial. And I've also posted the recipe that I created. I created it off a couple of YouTube videos that I found that used the traditional Cypriot recipe. So go give that a go. Fantastic recipe and well worth it. So, welcome to the news. Now, the cheese news this episode is about would you believe, an electricity company. Now, what's that got to do with cheese, you ask? Well, they actually make their electricity, as I hinted in the ways to use whey segment, they actually make their electricity from excess whey. And the company is called the Green Whey Energy Company. It's in Wisconsin in the United States of America. And what they do, the company handles wastewater from cheese and soy processing plants, which would normally be spread on crops. Now, apparently, there are some tighter regulations over there in the US, so they can't spread that around too much. It probably taints the groundwater if they over-fertilise with that. So what Green Whey Company does is it converts the waste water or waste whey into electricity, heat and fertiliser. So they work with 7 dairies and they supply thousands of litres of waste whey daily, and that comes via a truck or a pipeline to each of the dairies because they must be quite local. They put that into a large tank and they add some additives to it. Funny about that. And what happens is that then they get it to the proper pH levels, and they anaerobically process the whey, and it starts digesting and creating methane. And they pump the methane off into 2 massive big engines that runs on the methane, and it creates electricity. And also there are byproducts after that. So when the byproducts are water, so that's fantastic. They can use that again. And biosolids. So what they use the biosolids as, the sludge as fertilizer, and obviously the electricity, which is fantastic after they burn the methane. So well done to the Green Whey Energy Company over in Wisconsin, USA. Now, we've got a few listener questions, and the first one comes from Glenn, so I'll just play that now.
Hey Gavin, I enjoyed your video about the Colby cheese. Could you tell me more about your cheese press? I can't tell from the press that you're using with that spring how you can tell how much pressure you're putting down on that. If you could let me know, thanks.
No problems, Glenn. Thank you very much for your voicemail. The mini cheese press that I use has a 50-pound spring on the top. So once I put the cheese into the cheese mould, I put a follower on top, and then on top of the follower, I put the 50-pound spring, or 22 kilos, I think it is. And what I do, it's an estimation, right? There's not too much science to it. It's more art than science. So I know that when the spring is halfway compressed, then that equates to 25 pounds, or about 12.5 kilos. And then just guess from there. So if the recipe calls for a light pressing, obviously I only compress the spring a little bit. But most recipes have a range between 25 and 50 pounds of pressure. And so that's what I use. Other people, if they have a Dutch press, they will hang weights off of the arm for the Dutch press. And that's pretty easy to determine how much weight is on them. I actually wrote a post over on littlegreencheese.com around home cheese presses, or do-it-yourself cheese presses. Pop over and have a look at that. I hope that's answered your question, Glenn. I've got a couple of emails from listeners as well. Let's just bring up the first one there. The first one I received today from Patricia. And Patricia comes from Aurora in Colorado, United States. Now, Patricia asks, "Hi Gavin, I have watched your video on making Swiss cheese. I put mine in the cave for 7 days, and about 12 hours after I took it out to sit in room temperature for 2 weeks, I noticed it to have an oily quality on the outside. Is that natural?" Well, yes, Patricia, it is. It is quite natural for that type of cheese. You'll find it also on other high-temperature cheeses like Parmesan and Romano and Gruyere. They all have a slightly oily touch to them. It is natural. If you get a little bit concerned about it, you can wipe it off. No big deal. But you'll find that your Swiss-type cheese or your Emmentaler will start to swell over the next few weeks and form the eyes. So that's fantastic. I hope that's helped out. I've got another question here and this one's from Cole, and Cole sent in a few questions before. It's a question or an idea. He says, "Hi Gavin, just a question or an idea. I've been looking for a set of instructions for making a Castello type cheese, but I cannot find one on the net, or am I looking in the incorrect areas for it?" He also goes on to say that it's much liked in his circle of friends, and it'll be a great cheese to have in the cheese fridge on offer. So, really, Cole, I do know of a friend, a fellow cheesemaker. His name is Gukan, and I actually did an interview with him. I think it was the second or third podcast. And he makes a cheese very similar to a Castello Blue, which is a cross between a Camembert and a Gorgonzola, and he calls it a Camberzola. I'm pretty sure that's how he pronounced it. And basically, I think he's got a recipe on his site, and I'll share that in the show notes. And basically, when you add in, so you're making a basic Camembert, and you add in your Geotrichum or your penicillin Camemberti, and you also add penicillin Roqueforti, so the blue cheese mould, all at the same time, and that develops into, if you use his method, into a nice Castello Blue type cheese. So I hope that helps, and look for those in the show notes. Okay, the final email is from Mike, and Mike comes from, I think he's from the UK. Not too sure. Sorry about that, Mike, if you're not. Mike says, "Hi, Gavin. Hope you're well. Many thanks for your last help around storing Camembert in plastic containers in the fridge. It has made a huge difference in staying moist. I would now like your experience on an issue I have with some Camembert we made, and it's the first time this has happened." He attached a couple of pictures, and basically it shows that a couple of days after the white mould appeared, as it's supposed to, a yellow mould started to form as well. And he says, "I'm not sure why. You will also note that in picture number 4, we have removed it and resalted. Any ideas? Is it safe or does it need ditching?" Well, I've only had this happened before, but it wasn't on a Camembert, it was on a Caerphilly. So basically all I did was scrape that mould off and resalt the cheese, and it went away. Now on a soft cheese, it's probably a little bit harder. You'll have to, and by looking at his pictures, and it's difficult on a podcast obviously, it covers the entire cheese. So my advice to Mike was to smell the cheese. If it had an off smell, then there's probably not much you can do with it. I wouldn't even try to save it. You could dip it into a brine to try and kill off that mould, but then you would have to re-inoculate with Penicillium camberti or Geotrichum. So probably best if you start it again and pay a little bit more attention to sanitisation and go from there. Well, that's all the listener questions that I had this week. Well, that's the end of the episode. So for upcoming workshop dates, recipes, and YouTube video tutorials, you can all find them on littlegreencheese.com. You can also find my ebook, Keep Calm and Make Cheese, The Beginner's Guide to Cheese Making at Home. And that's available in all ebook formats. You can also find all of my video tutorials either in my ebook or on my YouTube channel. Just search for Greening of Gavin. Thanks for listening, curd nerds, and stay tuned for the next episode of Little Green Cheese. During this podcast, you heard royalty-free music by Kevin MacLeod. I played Malt Shop Bop, News Theme, and Call to the Dairy Cows.